Hello, everyone. Today we will be reading from the complete fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm. Story today is Snow White and Rose Red. A poor widow lived all alone in a small cottage, and in front of this cottage was a garden with two rose bushes. One bore white roses and the other red. The widow had two children who looked like the rose bushes. One was called Snow White and the other Rose Red. They were more pious and kind, more hard-working and diligent than any other two children in the world. To be sure, Snow White was more quiet and gentle than Rose Red, who preferred to run around in the meadows and fields, look for flowers, and catch butterflies. Snow White stayed at home with her mother, helped her with the housework, or read to her when there was nothing to do. The two children loved each other so much that they always held hands whenever they went out. And when Snow White said, "Let us never leave each other," Rose Red answered, "Never, as long as we live." And their mother added, "Whatever one of you has, remember to share it with the other." They often wandered in the forest all alone and gathered red berries. The animals never harmed them, and indeed entrusted them completely and would come up to them. The little hare would eat a cabbage leaf out of their hands. The roe grazed by their side. The stag leapt merrily around them, and the birds sat still on their branches and sang whatever tune they knew. Nothing bad ever happened to the girls. If they stayed too long in the forest and night overtook them, they would lie down next to each other on the moss and sleep until morning came. Their mother knew this and did not worry about them. Once, when they had spent the night in the forest and the morning sun had wakened them, they saw a beautiful child in a white, glistening garment sitting near them. The child stood up, looked at them in a friendly way, but went into the forest without saying anything. When they looked around, they realized that they had been sleeping at the edge of a cliff and would have certainly fallen over if they had gone a few more steps in the darkness. Their mother told them that the child must have been the angel who watches over good children. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's cottage so clean that it was a joy to look inside. In the summer, Rose Red took care of the house, and every morning she placed two flowers in front of her mother's bed before she awoke, a rose from each one of the bushes. In the winter, Snow White lit the fire and hung the kettle over the hearth. The kettle was made out of brass, but glistened like gold because it was polished so clean. In the evening, when the snowflakes fell, the mother said, "Go, Snow White, and bolt the door." Then they sat down at the hearth, and their mother put on her glasses and read aloud from a large book, while the two girls sat and spun as they listened. On the ground next to them lay a little lamb, and behind them sat a white dove with its head tucked under its wing. One evening, as they were sitting together, there was a knock on the door, as if someone wanted to be let in. The mother said, "Quick, Rose Red, open the door. It must be a traveler looking for shelter." Rose Red pushed back the bolt, thinking that it would be some poor man, but instead it was a bear. He stuck his thick black head through the door, and Rose Red jumped back and screamed loudly. The little lamb bleated, the dove fluttered in wings, and Snow White hid herself behind her mother's bed. However, the bear began to speak and said, "Don't be afraid. I won't harm you. I'm half frozen, only want to warm myself here a little." "You poor bear," the mother said, "lie down by the fire and take care that it does not burn your fur." Then she called out, "Snow White, Rose Red, come out. The bear won't harm you. He means well." They both came out, and gradually the lamb and dove also drew near and lost their fear of him. Then the bear said, "Come, children, dust the snow off my coat a little." So they fetched a broom and swept the fur clean. Afterwards, he stretched himself out beside the fire and uttered growls to show how content and comfortable he was. It did not take them long to all become accustomed to one another, and the clumsy guest had to put up with the mischievous pranks of the girls. They tugged his fur with their hands, planted their feet upon his back and rolled him over, or they took a hazel switch and hit him. When he growled, they just laughed. The bear took everything in good spirit. Only when they became too rough did he cry out, "Let me live, children. Snow White, Rose Red, would you beat your suitor dead?" When it was time to sleep, and the others went to bed, the mother said to the bear, "You're welcome, in God's name, to lie down by the hearth." Then you'll be protected from the cold and bad weather." As soon as dawn arrived, the two girls let him go outside, and he trotted over the snow into the forest. From then on, the bear came every evening at a certain time, lay down by the hearth, and allowed the children to play with him as much as they wanted. And they became so accustomed to him that they never bolted the door until their black playmate had arrived. One morning, when spring had made its appearance, and everything outside was green, the bear said to Snow White, "Now I must go away, and I shall not return the entire summer." "But where are you going, dear bear?" asked Snow White. "I must go into the forest and guard my treasures from the wicked dwarfs. In the winter, when the ground is frozen hard, they must remain underground and can't work their way through to the top. But now that the sun has thawed and warmed the earth, they will break through, climb out, search around, and steal. Once they get something in their hands and carry it to their caves, it will not easily see the light of day again." Snow White was very sad about his departure. She unlocked the door, and when the bear hurried out, he became caught on the bolt and a piece of his fur ripped off. And it seemed to Snow White that she saw gold glimmering through the fur, but she was not sure. The bear hurried away and soon disappeared behind the trees. Some time after, the mother sent the girls into the forest to gather firewood. There they found a large tree lying on the ground that had been chopped down. Something was jumping up and down on the grass near the trunk, but they could not tell what it was. As they came closer, they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and a beard that was snow white and a yard long. The tip of the beard was caught in a crack of the tree, and the little fellow was jumping back and forth like a dog on a rope, and did not know what to do. He glared at the girls with his fiery red eyes and screamed, "What are you standing there for? Can't you come over here and help me?" "How did you get into this jam, little man?" asked Rose Red. "You stupid nosy goose," answered the dwarf. "I wanted to split the tree to get some wood for my kitchen. We dwarfs need but little food. However, it gets burned fast when we use those thick logs. We don't devour such large portions as you coarse and greedy people." I had just driven in the wedge safely, and everything would have gone all right, but the cursed wedge was too smooth, and it sprang out unexpectedly. The tree snapped shut so rapidly that I couldn't save my beautiful white beard. Now it's stuck there, and I can't get away. And all you silly, creamy-faced things can do is laugh. Ugh, you're just nasty. The girls tried as hard as they could, but they could not pull the beard out. It was stuck too tight. "I'll run and get somebody," Rose Red said. "Crazy fool," the dwarf snarled. "Why run and get someone? The two of you are already enough. Can't you think of something better?" "Don't be so impatient," said Snow White. "I'll think of something." She took out a pair of scissors from her pocket and cut the tip of his beard. As soon as the dwarf felt that he was free, he grabbed his sack filled with gold that was lying neat between the roots of the tree. He lifted it out and grumbled to himself, "Uncouth slobs, how could you cut off a piece of my fine beard? Good riddance to you." Upon saying this, he swung the sack over his shoulder and went away without once looking at the girls. Some time after this, Snow White and Rose Red wanted to catch some fish for dinner. As they approached the brook, they saw something like a large grasshopper bouncing toward the water as if it wanted to jump in. They ran to the spot and recognized the dwarf. "Where are you going?" asked Rose Red. "You don't want to jump into the water, do you?" "I'm not such a fool as that," the dwarf screamed. "Don't you see that the cursed fish wants to pull me in?" The little man had been sitting there and fishing, and unfortunately the wind had caught his beard, so that it had become entangled with his line. Just then a large fish had bitten the bait, and the feeble little dwarf did not have the strength to land the fish, which kept the upper hand and pulled him to the water. To be sure, the dwarf tried to grab hold of the reeds and rushes, but that did not help too much. He was compelled to follow the movements of the fish and was in constant danger of being dragged into the water. But the girls had come just in the nick of time. They held on to him tightly and tried to untangle his beard from the line. However, it was to no avail. The beard and line were meshed together, and there was nothing left to do but to take out the scissors and cut off a small part of his beard. When the dwarf saw this, he screamed at them, "You bird brains! You've disfigured my face like barbarians. It was not enough that you clipped the tip of my beard. Now you've cut off the best part. I won't be able to show myself among my friends. May you both walk for miles on end until the soles of your shoes are burned off." Then he grabbed a sack of pearls that was lying in the rushes, and without saying another word, he dragged it away and disappeared behind a rock. It happened that soon after this, the girls were sent by their mother to the city to buy thread, needles, lace, and ribbons. Their way led over a heath, which had huge pieces of rock scattered here and there. A large bird circled slowly in the air above them, flying lower and lower until it finally landed on the ground, not too far from the rock. Right after that, they heard a piercing, terrible cry. They ran to the spot and saw with horror that the eagle had seized their old acquaintance, the dwarf, and intended to carry him away. The girls took pity on him and grabbed hold of the little man as tightly as they could. They tugged against the eagle until finally the bird had to abandon his booty. When the dwarf had recovered from his initial fright, he screeched at them, "Couldn't you have handled me more carefully? You've torn my coat to shreds. It was thin enough to begin with, but now it's got holes and rips all over, you clumsy louts." Then he took a sack with jewels and once again slipped under a rock into his cave. The girls were accustomed to his ingratitude and continued on their way. They took care of their chores in the city, and when they crossed the heath again on their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had dumped his sack of jewels on a clean spot, not thinking that anyone would come by at such a late hour. The evening sun's rays were cast upon the glistening stones, which glimmered and sparkled in such radiant different colors that the girls had to stop and look at them. "Why are you standing there and gaping like monkeys?" the dwarf screamed, and his ash-gray face turned scarlet with rage. He was about to continue his cursing when a loud growl was heard and a black bear came trotting out of the forest. The dwarf jumped up in terror, but he could not reach his hiding place in time. The bear was already too near. Filled with fear, the dwarf cried out, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare my life, and I'll give you all my treasures. Look at the beautiful jewels lying there. Grant me my life. What good is a small, measly fellow like me? You wouldn't be able to feel me between your teeth. Those wicked girls over there would be better for you. They're such tender morsels, fat as young quails. For heaven's sake, eat them instead." The bear did not pay any attention to the dwarf's words, but gave the evil creature a single blow with his paw, and the dwarf did not move again. The girls had run away, but the bear called after them, "Snow White, Rose Red, don't be afraid. Wait, I'll go with you." Then they recognized his voice and stopped. When the bear came up to them, his bear skin suddenly fell off, and there stood a handsome man clad completely in gold. "I am the son of a king," he said, "and I had been cast under a spell by the wicked dwarf who stole my treasures. He forced me to run around the forest as a wild bear, and only his death could release me from the spell. Now he has received his justly earned punishment." Snow White was married to the prince, and Rose Red to his brother, and they shared the great treasures that the dwarf had collected in his cave. The old mother lived many more peaceful and happy years with her children. Indeed, she took the rose bushes with her, and they stood in front of her window, and every year they bore the most beautiful roses, white and red. So that was the tale of Rose Red and Snow White from the Complete Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm. If you enjoyed that, please feel free to leave a like and comment and subscribe. It would be great to see you around. And thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day.